I thought perhaps for people who haven't seen the starflowers in the exhibition, or haven't really taken, possibly until now, haven't seen them, images of them, I thought maybe we'd introduce the starflowers to anyone listening. You've already given us some hints about what they are. Can you describe them? So yeah, what kind of size paper, and how do we get, how would you technically describe it if you were cataloguing it or something?
The finished piece is 8 paper flowers, dipped in liquid porcelain, which was fired and installed at Sandham Memorial Chapel in Berkeley. The flowers themselves can also be referred to as stars. They are crafted out of thick paper, not too thick, thick enough to fold. I discovered the shape when playing with making hexaflexagons made from a strip of paper, turned into folded triangles to make a hexagon, and then I folded the corners in so the 6 becomes 3. Oftentimes the twirling of the cotton thread is actually securing that in place, so I didn't bind or glue them in any other way. In the paper versions, I do put a little hole in one of the points, otherwise they lie on their backs or on their tummies as if in water. I'm an associate artist at Chapel Art Studios, and one of my fellow associates, Susan Francis, said, "Oh, I'd like to see them dipped in porcelain," and I'd never heard of that before. I asked my friend Christine if she knew anything about liquid porcelain, and she said, yeah, of course, it's called porcelain slip, and I've got some in the studio. Her studio is just down the road from me, so I started going and hanging out at her hanging out at her place on Thursday evenings to put this to the test. She didn't know what to expect herself because she hadn't used porcelain in this way. Once I had the flowers, the threads came in useful because you dip them into the porcelain clay with lots of water stirred in.
Yeah. So is that a natural colour that you have there, or does it get tinted? Or
Natural. That's a clear glaze.
so is the glaze a separate surface on top of the porcelain?
Yes, I painted it on, like cooking a pie and putting milk or egg on it doesn't change the colour, but it does make it glisten and shine.
And what about the wee branch or piece of wood that you used at Sandham?
That came from the tree, the yew tree I mentioned earlier. It wasn't particularly planned, it was quite spontaneous. I took it without a plan, but because it is a listed building, it came in handy to lodge the installation in place without marking the walls.
I like the connection with the original yew tree. That's wonderful. From your sense, what is it like to hold one? And are they equivalent to the size or weight of something else?
I think approximately they fit in the palm of my hand. They're incredibly light, surprisingly light, although they are closer to paper than porcelain, but compared to paper, they are heavy. It's like that hardness, that frozenness, like water gets heavier when it freezes, kind of like that. Certainly, I was surprised how many people wanted to touch them on the opening night. Can I hold them was certainly a response. They instill a great deal of carefulness, and it's interesting that they are very still. I think that's no accident in that setting. It felt strange to be putting them all there, still, after they had been hanging in the wind.
I think there are still traces, though, of that. Like it's their stillness inside space had will have had many layers of significance for that particular location and space, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But even to my mind, perhaps because I had already seen them blowing in the tree, I have a sense of their airiness and their spaciousness and their dynamism, their sense of movement, the dynamics of them. and I think perhaps that's also because they speak to heritage and many flowers and many stars that have predated us and that will go further. So, I mean, there's a whole lot of different movement, I think, in them, which is, I would hazard to say, is part of their magic. So but I'm fascinated that people asked you whether they could hold them. At the actual public exhibition, were they allowed to be held, or did you have to kind of keep people distant from them, or did you have to put up a sign, or?
No, because they're so delicate, they inspire people to be very careful. Also, in the setting, they were above the bath, and no one was going to lean over it to reach them on their windowsill. And I can't remember who asked me. It was just when the artist is present, and I remembered quite what it adds actually to be with the work and have that conversation with people.
Yes, absolutely. I could imagine you taking them to places and having them having a number of different lives. When I've considered them from half a world away, I know that obviously I would have some sense of a connection or an interest that might be heightened because we're related. But as far as I can understand the other layers of my response, I'm sensing the qualities of lightness, delicate, you said, but the sense that they're light and energy, their energy in them. I'm also amazed at the originality, the gumption, the audacity, perhaps, you have in forming them the way you have in such an organic kind of shape that contrasts incredibly with the symmetrical and the stylized traditional symbols of Latvian design that you link them to.
Yes, so let's talk a bit about that. In the Latvian tradition, there's a morning star shape, the ulseklis with 8 points, an octagram which can be found in many traditions. Latvians adorn their clothing, folk costumes, tools with lots of different symbols. All of them are related to nature deities, the spirits and presences in the landscape. As a Latvian from my father's side, I have my own personal connection or sense of the place and traditions. My identity, I suppose. And the symbols are very important to me because they are the only language that I've got. I don't have the actual spoken language of Latvia. Yes, there are lots of time and associations and impressions gathered into one moment in this work. We need to start at the beginning again, the paper flowers in the tree. There is simplicity in using basic two-hand materials, and paper is something that I'm very comfortable with. In previous years, when I was being very wordy and up in my head, I made the decision to make little miniature books with paper, needle, and thread. The idea was to write in a non-verbal, non-written way. These are very tactile. They are designed to be held, moved. Yes, they were the first activity I did when I started developing new work. My daily walks, which I called drawing with trees for the first few weeks. Going back to what you said about the very natural forms, they are like leaves in that every starflower is different. I wasn't geometrically OCD about them being all the same dimensions, and some of them even have a stray, some petals popped out, and one of them has 4 points. So they are all different, and that's something I really appreciate about going through a process with multiple aspects. It was the same with printmaking, as the result evolves in different ways as you process the materials.
So, do you remember how you made the flowers? What prompted you?
I had been making hexaflexagons for a while because my son wanted me to. The flowers are created by adding 3 extra folds. The artwork was, I guess, not the action of creating that shape, but deciding I was going to make multiple of them and then gift them to the tree. There is, I suppose, a kind of magic in taking a flat surface and turning it into a sculpture, essentially, and these are potentially everyday actions. I've given it literally extra weight by dipping it in porcelain, but in terms of its function and ability to move you, I think that's retained and already there in the paper version. I had a new perspective brought to me about the spider, the ones that weave webs, in that the spider web with its thread is actually very connected to nature and the elements, because if you think about the fact it's connecting to the earth and branches and edges, anchoring its web, and the spider is waiting patiently as well. They're not hunting, they are trusting, and then just pouncing once the food is in the net. And there's dewdrops, the water, it's like the spider is literally collaborating with nature elements and energies. And it's that combination which creates beauty. Elements and aspects changing throughout a season or the life of that web. I think many artists would say they collaborate with materials because the materials speak to them as they speak to the materials. But come to think of it, I have the same thing, not purely with materials, but with environment, with the weather itself, with the ways I converse with my environment on my walks, and sometimes my spiderweb is my mobile phone as I'm catching these sounds or plays of light in it. I think one of the key words that I didn't get around to mentioning or has bubbled up subsequently is actually love. The wishes on the wind is a reference to something that sounds quite trivial, but people don't actually believe wishes become true. They're not solid enough to be taken seriously. My website is called The Dream Forest for a reason, but it was a revelation to me not that many years ago when I was putting images together on a Pinterest board full of tree houses and libraries and outdoor dining and reading books in trees and foraging and water pools under waterfalls for skinny dipping. It was a turning point when I realised that dreams are wishes for your life and things that you're supposed to take seriously. And within a year I was skinny dipping under a waterfall and enjoying bonfires and all the things not as I pictured it, not all in one place, but certainly in the course of my year. So wishes on the wind, I mean intentions. I'm putting this out there, and I feel it felt like an honouring of the tree as well, an expression of love for the natural world, because it was really appreciating the elements.
And I think that you had a significant history already with this area that you live in, and you've walked it and talked it and been with others for quite a while in that area. Like you've been part of community work around that area, the village, as well as doing your own.
I wouldn't have recognised that description until I started walking every day. It's only in the last 2 years, going back to the idea of wanting to move people, that I've accepted nature as a collaborator and found nature out my window as soon as I step out the door. It's only then that I've been touched by it and touched it and had that exchange. As someone who left Australia when I was 9, I felt like Latvia was a fairy tale, unreal country, and the grief that, as you know, is felt when you leave a place, as your relationship to it, as you're not fed by it every day or in your daily life and you can't access it and love it back. It's hard because it's part of you. You carry it with you, and maybe that's an important thing because I grew up in Australia and the trees were dry and they sounded like paper in the wind. And they're loved by the sun, and the sun is so hot and dry and it just warms you all the way through like a smile. And so my sense of the land started there in the forest, which I remember as a sunny forest. And when I became a teenager and got into personality tests, I found out I was an Aries and identified as a fire sign and really identified with fire. And it was only when I visited Latvia a couple of years ago that I connected with a kind of earthiness that I call my own. Sun is another symbol in Latvian folklore, but it's female.
Interestingly, with the starflowers that you've created, they, when we look at them, they have light and shade, both light and shade all of the time because of the way they sit. I think they're a wonderful reminder that our lives will have all of that. And also the point you were making about warmth and energy and fire, the ones that you've created in a more, I'm not sure what the word is, more durable form by adding the porcelain, they've been fired. They've been put in a kiln to produce that particular form of them.
Thank you for that. So, Wishes on the Wind, it is with love. It is a loving action, and I think it is an intention sealed with love. And my intention with the initial placing it in the tree, I didn't write anything down. I didn't plan it. It wasn't even stated in any other way other than the action. Placing it in the tree was the statement. And I imagine that those who noticed it in the tree and appreciated them in any way were experiencing an aspect of my intention, which was that they were perceiving it in a new way, rather than just walking past that tree. And they are like gifts to the tree and to the people and to myself as well, because I didn't even realize one of the things I've been learning is that things aren't immediate, and it's special to me that they stayed there for almost a whole year. And I was trying to recover from a good 10 years or so of thinking that I was like the sun. As my son will tell me, the sun will die one day, but from our human perspective, it does seem like this infinite ball of never-ending warmth.
So this is a threshold into another theme topic I wanted to ask you about, which seems the right time to ask this. Which was really whether you tell us a little bit about how the starflowers are a part of your own story.
Okay, so on any immediate level, my starflowers are possibly the beginning of a wish for more nourishing relations with the world, to come into relationship with people and the natural world, with everything really, in a way that is more sustaining of my health, my body, my mind, creativity, my ability to offer something of value to the world. And with this new understanding that I touched upon earlier, I am human, which means I do not have an infinite source of energy, and even if I did, my body couldn't sustain it, and therefore it's incredibly precious. The life, the aliveness. People talk a lot about time. Don't waste your time, it's limited. But I'm not so sure about that. Time is very strange, and it misses the point when the point is that a lot of people, if they're worried about that, they're going to get very busy and try to do something valuable and important and faster, rather than taking an opportunity to turn into themselves and where they're at in a cycle of life, in a cycle of a year, in now and now and now. In 2019, I also published an artist's book full of poems which were written right before I started daily walks. They were accompanied by film stills, or video collage, I suppose you could call them. That was published within a month of putting the flowers in the tree, and I imagined I might hang the flowers again in spring the following year, but instead the following year I found myself exhibiting them at Sandham Memorial Chapel. And this exhibition was a group exhibition with the associate artist at CAS, and it had been in the making for a long time.